HP article, 12,700 words, 64 minutes. Heading: The World Order, a study in the hegemony of parasitism. The history and practices of the parasitic financial elite, by Eustace Mullins, 1984. Heading: Chapter 1.2, Consolidating the Empire. Bank of England, World War I, RIA and CFR, Opium Trade, First City. Heading: The House of Orange and the Bank of England. Like other enterprises with which the Rothschilds have been connected, the Bank of England has been a center of international intrigue and espionage since its founding in 1694. Although the Rothschilds did not become associated with the bank until 1812, when Nathan Mayer Rothschild increased his fortune 6,500 times by taking advantage of false rumors that somehow swept the London Stock Exchange, purporting that England had lost to Napoleon at Waterloo. The Bank of England originated in a revolution when William Roman III, Prince of Orange, drove King James Roman II from the throne. Since the Bank of England charter was granted by William in 1694, there has never been another revolt against the crown. The royal family has been secure because the source of money, crucial to a revolution, has remained under control. King Charles Roman II had managed to retain a shaky position because of support from the Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers, and others whose first names formed the word cabal, introducing a new term for intrigue. His successor, James Roman II, tried to placate the powerful lords of England, but even his longtime supporters, scenting a change of power, began secret negotiations with the Prince of Orange. Wilhelm I, Prince of Orange, had been married several times to Anne of Saxony, Charlotte de Bourbon, and Princess de Coligny. Today, every ruling house of Europe, as well as the modern power, is a direct descendant of King William, including Queen Juliana of the Netherlands, Margaretha, Queen of Denmark, Olaf V of Norway, Gustav of Sweden, Constantine of Greece, Prince Rainier of Monaco, and Jean, Grand Duke of Luxembourg, whose son married the daughter of C. Douglas Dillon. Lord Shrewsbury, Charles Talbot had been given places by both Charles Roman II and James Roman II. Nevertheless, he played a leading role in the revolution. He took £12,000 to Holland to support William in 1688, returned with him, and was made Secretary of State. Sidney Godolphin, one of James Roman II's last adherents, joined with the Duke of Sunderland and the Duchess of Portsmouth in correspondence with William prior to his invasion of England, and was appointed head of the Treasury by William. Henry Compton, Earl of Northampton, and Bishop of London, had been removed by James Roman II. He signed the invitation to William to come to England. He was reinstated in his see in 1688. His son Francis became Lord Privy Seal. John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, had entered into negotiations with the Prince of Orange in Oct. 1687, and expressed his readiness to support him in Aug. 1688. To allay James Roman II's suspicions, Marlborough then signed a renewed oath of fidelity to him on 1688. On 24, 1688, he joined the forces of William of Orange. Although William had married Mary, the daughter of James Roman II, and had a legitimate claim to the throne of England, he could not take power as long as James Roman II was on the throne. Therefore, he entered England with a force of 10,000 foot soldiers and 4,000 horse, a small force with which to conquer a great kingdom. With him were Churchill, Bentinck, the first Earl of Portland, Earl of Shrewsbury, and Lord Polwarth, whose descendant is a prominent member of the Anglo-American banking establishment. James Roman II fled to the court of Louis Roman XIV in France and was declared abdicated. Marlborough, ancestor of Winston Churchill, whose former daughter-in-law, Pam Harriman, is the leading power in the Democratic Party, is described in The Captain General by Ira Brown. Quote, the Commissioner of Public Accounts found that the Duke of Marlborough had accepted gifts amounting to some £60,000 from Antonio Machado and Sir Solomon de Medina, contractors for bread and wagons for the army abroad, and to 1/2% of all money allotted for payment of troops, some £175,000, later revised to £350,000. End quote. Marlborough claimed it had all been spent for intelligence, but witnesses testified he could not have spent more than £5,000 for this purpose in all of his campaigns. Donald Chandler's biography of Marlborough points out that the bread contractors such as Solomon and Moses Medina, Menhir Hackett, Solomon Abraham, Vanderkind Machado were for the most part Spanish or Dutch Jews of varying reliability and venality. Chandler says that they consistently gained short weight or added sand to their corn sacks. For a number of years, Medina, as chief army contractor, contributed an annual commission of £6,000 a year to Marlborough as his rake-off on army contracts. In addition to his English supporters, who were previously loyal to King James Roman II, William brought with him from Amsterdam the group of avaricious financiers who were also the suppliers of his armies. One of his first official acts was the conferring of knighthood on Solomon de Medina. Machado and Pereira provisioned his armies in Spain and Holland. Medina supplied Marlborough in Flanders. Joseph Cordesat supplied Lord Galway in Spain, and Abraham Prado supplied the British army during the 7-Year War. The most important act of William's reign was his granting of the Charter of the Bank of England in 1694, although most of his biographers omit this salient fact. The concept of a central bank, which would have the power of note issue or issuing money, had already taken hold in Europe. The Bank of Amsterdam was started in 1609. Its members aided William in his conquest of England. The Bank of Hamburg was chartered in 1619. The Bank of Sweden began the practice of issuing notes in 1661. These banks were chartered by financiers whose ancestors had been bankers in Venice and Genoa. As the tide of world power shifted northward in Europe, so did the financiers. The Warburgs of Hamburg had begun as the Abraham Bell Banco family, the largest bankers in Venice. An interesting technique is revealed by the Charter of the Bank of England. It was slipped through as part of a tonnage bill, which was later to become a recognized parliamentary technique. The Charter provides that rates and duties upon tonnage of ships are made security to such persons as shall voluntarily advance the sum of £1,500,000 towards carrying on the war against France. Other European banks, such as the banks of Genoa, Venice and Amsterdam, were primarily banks of deposit, but the Bank of England began the practice of coining its own credit into money, the beginning of the monetarist movement. The Bank of England soon created a new class of moneyed interests in the city, as opposed to the power of the old barons, whose fortunes derived from their land holdings. Of the 500 original stockholders, 450 lived in London. This was the dawn of the preeminence of the city, now the world's leading financial center. For this reason, the Rothschilds identified their key American banks with the code word city. Early descriptions of the shareholders of the Bank of England identified them as a society of about 1,300 persons. They included the King and Queen of England, who received shares to the value of £10,000 each, Marlborough, who invested £10,000. He also invested large sums from his commissions in the East India Co. in 1697, and later became governor of the Hudson Bay Company, which paid a 75% dividend. Lord Shrewsbury, who invested £10,000. Godolphin, who invested £7,000. He predicted that the Bank of England would not only finance trade, but would carry the burden of her wars, which was proven true in the next 300 years. Virginia Cowell writes, in The Great Marlborough, England emerged from the war as the dominant force, because the Bank of England's credit system enabled her to bear the burden of war without undue strain. Other charter subscribers were William Bentinck, later the first Earl of Portland. He had been a page in William of Orange's household, accompanied William to England in 1670 on his initial visit, handled the delicate negotiations of his marriage with Mary in 1677, and prepared the details of William's invasion of England. He was given the title of Earl of Portland, and became the most trusted agent of William's foreign policy. In 1984, we find the 9th Duke, Cavendish Bentinck, is chairman of Bayer UK Limited, and Nuclear Chemie Mitchell GmbH, Germany. He also had a distinguished career in foreign service, joining the Foreign Office in 1922. He represented England at the successive Paris, Hague and Locarno conferences, was chairman of Joint Intelligence for the Chiefs of Staff 1939-45, and ambassador to Poland during the critical years of 1945-47, when that country was turned over to the Soviet Union, with England's surreptitious support. Other charter subscribers to the Bank of England were, quote, list. The Duke of Devonshire, William Cavendish, who built Chatsworth. He also had signed the invitation to William to assume the throne of England. He was High Steward at Anne's coronation in 1702, and was said to lead a profligate private life. The present Duke sold 7 drawings in July 1984 for $9.2 million, and the 11th Duke married Deborah Freeman Mitford, daughter of Baron Redesdale. His present brother-in-law, Baron Redesdale, is Vice President of Chase Manhattan Bank. The Duke of Leeds, Sir Thomas Osborne, who also signed the invitation to William. He was Lord High Treasurer and had arranged the marriage of Mary. He was later impeached for receiving a large bribe to procure the charter of the East India Co. in 1691. Because of his favoured position at court, the proceedings were never concluded, and he left one of the largest fortunes in England. The Earl of Pembroke, Thomas Herbert, who became the first Lord of the Admiralty, and later Lord Privy Seal. The Earl of Carnarvon, who is also Earl of Powys and Earl of Bradford. Lord Edward Russell, created Earl of Orford 1697, he had joined the service of William in 1683, was appointed Treasurer of the Navy 1689, First Lord of Admiralty 1696-17, and Lord Justice 1697-1714. Sir Robert Walpole, the famed British leader, was created Earl of Orford in the second creation. William Paterson, usually credited with being the founder of the Bank of England, he was forced out within a year. Sir Theodore Jansen, who invested £10,000. Dr. Hugh Chamberlain. John Skill, an eccentric writer and pamphleteer. Dr. Nicholas Marvin, son of President Barebones, who started the first insurance company in Great Britain. John Holland, a reputed Englishman who also started the Bank of Scotland in 1695. Michael Godfrey, who died at Namur, Belgium on his way to Antwerp to establish a branch of the Bank of England. He was the first deputy governor of the Bank of England, and nephew of Sir Edward Godfrey, who was murdered by Titus Oakes in 1678. Sir John Howland and 20 members of his family were also early stockholders. Sir John became Lord of the Admiralty and Lord Mayor of London. His brother James was deputy governor of the Bank of England. Salomon de Medina, later knighted by William Roman III. Sir William Stone. Sir Gilbert Heathcote, Director of Bank of England 1699-1701, and from 1723-25, he was Sheriff and later Lord Mayor of London, founded the New East India Co. in 1693. His parsimony was ridiculed by Alexander Pope in his quatrains. Sir Charles Montague, 1st Earl of Halifax, and Chancellor of the Exchequer, the present Earl is a Director of Hambro Bank. Marquess Normandy, John Sheffield, also held the title of Duke of Buckingham. He is buried in Westminster Abbey. Thomas Howard, Earl of Arundel, Comptroller of the Royal Household. Charles Chaplin, and the philosopher John Locke. End quote. In his The Bank of England, a history, Sir John Clapham notes that by 1721, a number of Spanish and Portuguese Jews had been buying stock in the Bank of England. Medina, two da Costas, Fonseca, Henriquez, Mendez, Nunes, Rodriguez, Salvador Teixeira de Max, Jacob and Theodore Jacobs, Moses and Jacob Abravanel, Francis Pereira. Clapham notes that since 1751 there has been very little trading in Bank of England stock. It has been very closely held for more than 2 centuries. The Bank of England has played a prominent role in American history. Without it, the United States would not exist. The American colonists considered themselves loyal Englishmen to a man, but when they began to enjoy unequaled prosperity by printing and circulating their own colonial scrip, the stockholders of the Bank of England went to George Roman III and informed him that their monopoly of interest-bearing notes in the colonies was at stake. He banned the scrip, with the result that there was an immediate depression in the commercial life of the Americans. This was the cause of the rebellion. As Benjamin Franklin pointed out, the little tax on tea, amounting to about $1 a year per American family, could have been borne, but the colonists could not survive the banning of their own money. The Bank of England and the Rothschilds continued to play a dominant role in the commercial life of the United States, causing panics and depressions for the Rothschilds whenever their officials were instructed to do so. When the Second Bank of the United States expired in 1836, and President Jackson refused to renew it, thus creating great prosperity in the United States when government funds were deposited in other banks, the Rothschilds punished the upstarts by causing the Panic of 1837. As Henry Clune writes in 28 Years on Wall Street, p. 157, the Panic of 1837 was aggravated by the Bank of England when it in one day threw out all the paper connected with the United States. By refusing to credit American notes and stocks, the Bank of England created financial panic among the holders of that paper. The panic enabled Rothschild's agents, Peabody and Belmont, to reap a fortune in buying up depreciated stocks during the panic. The Bank of England has played a prominent role in wars, revolutions, and espionage, as well as business panics. When Napoleon escaped from Elba in 1815, the London gold market jumped overnight from 4LB.60 to 5LB.70. The leading buyer was Nathan Mayer Rothschild, who was under orders from the British Treasury to dispatch gold to the Duke of Wellington, hoping to stop Napoleon. After Waterloo, the price of gold dropped. During the 20th century, the most important name at the Bank of England was Lord Montagu Norman. His grandfather, George Ward Norman, had been governor of the Bank of England from 1821-1872, longer than any other man. His other grandfather, Lord Collett, was governor of the Bank of England from 1887-89, and managing partner of Brown Shipley Co. in London for 25 years. In 1894, Montagu Norman was sent to New York to work in the offices of Brown Brothers. He was befriended by the Delano family, and lived with the Marco family, partners of Brown Bros. In 1907, Norman was elected to the court of the Bank of England. In 1912, he had a severe nervous breakdown, and was treated by Carl Jung in Switzerland. He became deputy governor of the Bank of England in 1916, and later served until 1944 as governor. The Wall Street Journal wrote of him in 1927. Quote, Mr. M. Collett Norman, the governor of the Bank of England, is now head and shoulders above all other British bankers. No other British banker has ever been as independent and supreme in the world of British finance as Mr. Norman is today. He has just been elected governor for the 8th year in succession. Before the war, no governor was allowed to hold office for more than 2 years, but Mr. Norman has broken all precedents. He runs his bank and his treasury as well. He appears to have no associations except his employees. He gives no interviews. He leaves the British financial world wholly in the thick as to his plans and ideas. End quote. The idea that one individual ran the Bank of England to suit himself, with no influences, is too ridiculous to be considered. What about the Rothschilds? What about the other shareholders? Carroll Quigley, in Tragedy and Hope, notes that M. Norman said, I hold the hegemony of the currency not. He is called the currency dictator of Europe. Lionel Fraser of J. Henry Schroeder notes in his autobiography, All to the Good, that he was in charge of Lord Norman's personal investments. He also notes of the firm of Helbert Wagg, former jewelers from Halberstadt and our London banking house, later J. Henry Schroeder Wagg. The firm was official brokers on stock exchange to the great and all-powerful House of Rothschild. Both Wagg and Schroeder had been in business in London for 159 years when they merged in 1960. Another writer notes that Lord Norman frequently consulted with J.P. Morgan before making his Bank of England decisions. Gordon Richardson, chairman of J. Henry Schroeder from 1962-72, then became governor of the Bank of England from 1972-83 when he was succeeded by Robert Lee Pemberton, chairman of the National Westminster Bank, also director of Equitable. He married into the Cecil Burghley family. The present directors of the Bank of England are, quote, list. G.W. McMahon, Deputy Governor since 1964, Economic Analyst Treasury 1953-57, Advisor British Embassy Washington 1957-60. Sir Adrian Cadbury, Chairman Cadbury Schweppes, Dyer, IBM UK. Leopold de Rothschild, N.M., Rothschild and Sons, etc. George V. London, Exec Dyer, Bank of England since 1947, served with IMF 1955-58. A.D. Lochley, Dyer, J. Henry Schroeder Wagg. G.A. Brain, Member Trilateral Commission, Treasurer European Movement, Franco-British Council, British North American Committee, lawyer for many unions and health associations. Sir Jasper Hallam has been on the board since 1936. B.G. Scully, Chairman S.G. Warburg Co., Orion Insurance, Union Discount of London, Mercury Securities, which now owns S.G. Warburg Co., Irwin Holdings. J.M. Clay, Dep. Chairman Hambros Bank, Chairman Johnson and Firth Brown Limited. Hambros Life Assurance. Sir David Steele, Chairman British Petroleum, Dyer, Kuwait Oil Co., The Wellcome Trust, Trustee The Economist, whose chairman is Evelyn de Rothschild. Lord Nelson of Stafford, Chairman GE Limited, Chairman Royal Worcester Co., Nadal, Bank of Australasia, International Nickel, British Aircraft, English Electric, Marconi Limited, Chairman World Power Conference, Worshipful Co. of Goldsmiths, Middle Eastern Assen. Lord Weir, Chairman The Weir Group, Chairman Great Northern Investment Trust. E.A.J. George, Exec Dyer Bank of England, Dyer, Gilt Edge Division Bank of England, INF 1972-72, Bank for International Settlements 1966-69. Sir Hector Lang, Chairman United Biscuit, Allied Lions, Royal Insurance. Sir Alastair Pilkington, Chairman Pilkington Bros, Glass, Dyer, British Petroleum, British Railways Board. End quote. The Bank of England also dominates the Bank of Scotland, whose chairman is Robert Bruce, Lord Balfour. His title Balfour of Burghley was created in 1607. He is manager of English Electric and Viking Oil. He married the daughter of Magnate S. Manasseh. Directors of Bank of Scotland include Lord Clydesmuir, also Dyer, Barclays Bank, and R.T. Hahn. Lord Palworth, Director of Halliburton, which interlocks with the Rothschild First Citibank of Houston and Citibank, Imperial Chemical Industries, Canadian Pacific, and Brown and Root Wimpey Highland Fabricators, which interlocks with George Wimpey plc, largest construction firm in the British Empire, whose 44 companies have revenues of £1.2 billion per year. Lord Palworth's daughter married Baron Moran, High Commissioner of Canada, who previously served as ambassador to Hungary and to Chad. Baron Moran's daughter married Baron Mount Evans, manager of Consolidated Goldfields. Directors of George Wimpey plc included S.S. Jardine, Viscount Hood, who is Chairman Petrofina UK, and Director J. Henry Schroeder Wagg, and Union Miniere, and Sir Joseph Latham, Chairman Ariel International, Director Deutsches Kreditbank. Wimpey Co. interlocks with Schroeder Limited, parent of J. Henry Schroeder Wagg. The Earl of Early David Ogilvy is chairman of Schroeder. He married Virginia Ryan, granddaughter of Otto Kahn and Thomas Fortune Ryan. The Earl is also director of Royal Bank of Scotland. Directors of Schroeder include Lord Franks, director of the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rhodes Trust, and Kennedy Center. He is a former ambassador to the United States. G.W. Malincrot, Sir E.G. Woodruff of Unlever, and Daniel Jensen of the Bank of England. Heading the Merchants of Death and World War I. One of the great Rothschild hoaxes was the disarmament movement of the early 1930s. The idea was not to disarm, but to persuade the nations to junk what arms they had so they could later be sold new ones. The Merchants of Death, as they were popularly known in those days, were never more than errand boys for their true masters, the Bankers of Death, or, as they were also known, the Brotherhood of Death. In 1897, Vickers, in which Rothschilds had the largest holding, bought Naval Construction and Armament Co., and Maxim Nordenfeldt Guns and Ammunition Co. The new Vickers Maxim Co. was able to test its products in the Spanish-American War, which was set off by J. and W. Seligman Co. to obtain the white gold sugar of Cuba. The Boer War of 1899-1901 to seize the gold and diamond fields of the Witwatersrand and the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, designed to weaken the Tsar and make the communist revolution inevitable. These three wars provided the excuse for tooling up for the mass production of World War I and Roman II. In 1897, an international power trust was formed, consisting of DuPont, Noble, Cowan, and Cotweiler, which divided the world into four distinct sales territories. The chairman of Vickers, Sir Herbert Lawrence, was director of Sun Assurance Office Limited, Sun Life Assurance, and chairman of the London Committee of the Ottoman Bank. Directors included Sir Otto Niemeyer, director of the Bank of England, and the Anglo International Bank, S. Lowe, the German arms magnate, Lowe & Co., Sir Vincent Caillard, president of the Ottoman Debt Council, financial expert on the Near East, and Sir Basil Navaroff, the mystery man of Europe. The high-water mark of the Merchants of Death hoax was reached in the Nye Committee hearings of 1934, copies of which are invariably missing in government libraries. Elder Hiss was investigator and counsel for the committee. Typical was Chairman Nye's questioning of Mr. Cars of the Electric Boat Co., a subsidiary of Vickers. Quote, Chairman NYE, in 1917, Mr. Cars, you drafted a letter to help Navaroff avoid paying income tax on your commissions to him of $766,852. There is Exhibit 24, a letter dated Sept. 21, 1917, addressed to Mr. H.C. Sheridan, Washington, D.C. Who is Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Cars? Cars, he owns the Hotel Washington. At that time he was the agent of Vickers Limited in this country, and he was also a representative of Navaroff. Mr. Sheridan handled Mr. Navaroff's income tax with White and Case. CHMN, did you know that this was false, that this omission of $1 million referred to was actually Sir Basil Navaroff's income? Cars, no, I did not know anything about Navaroff's income. CHMN, but you have told us that a letter by Navaroff 6 weeks earlier that 82,000 francs he received was his own personal income. Cars, I do not know what Navaroff did in his business. He did not tell me. CHMN, did Navaroff succeed in escaping the payment of income tax to the United States? Cars, I believe there was some settlement made. Sheridan handled it. Navaroff was never a stockholder insofar as I ever knew. The men who handle very large stock do not put the stock in their own names. CHMN, Navaroff wrote to you 19 May, 1925. I desire no thanks for what I have done, because I am bound to attend to the interest of my firm of Vickers and the Electric Boat Co. in both of which I am a stockholder not. Cars, I know he told me that, but I was never able to trace anything. End quote. Sen. Clark then pursued questioning on how the armaments firms and oil companies promoted wars. Quote. Clark, so this whole occasion of arming Peru and of the revolution in Bolivia on the basis of arming against Chile was based on erroneous rumor? Mr. Spenar, that is my impression. Clark, you wanted to interest the large oil companies in financing an armament program for South America. Cars, I was willing to present any proposition the government might approve with regard to any oil companies which might be interested. End quote. The Nye Committee frequently came back to Navaroff's activities, referring to him as a kind of superstar in high social and influential circles. For many years he exercised great influence on Prime Minister Lloyd George of England. Navaroff, who began his career as a brothel tout and underworld tough, arranged for Lloyd George to have an affair with Navaroff's wife. Arthur Mondy Gregory, an associate of Lloyd George, was also a Navaroff agent. Mondy Gregory for many years regularly peddled peerages in London clubs. Knighthoods, not hereditary, were £10,000-12,000. Baronetcies went for as high as £40,000, of which he paid Lloyd George a standard £5,000 each. Mondy Gregory was also closely associated with Sir Basil Thompson in British counter-espionage. Navaroff, who was born in 1851 in Constantinople, married one Emily Ann Burrows of Knightsbridge. Mondy Gregory then introduced Emily Ann to the sexually insatiable Lloyd George. From that time on, he was at Navaroff's mercy. Although Navaroff was closely associated with Lloyd George throughout World War I until 1922, when their association effectively ended Lloyd George's political career, the name Navaroff appears nowhere in Lloyd George's extensive memoirs. Lloyd George's political career came to an end after Navaroff persuaded him to help the Greeks against Turkey in 1920, a disastrous adventure which brought about Lloyd George's downfall from political power. George Donald McCormick, in The Mask of Merlin, the definitive work on Lloyd George, states, quote, Navaroff kept him, Lloyd George, closely informed on the Balkans. During the war, Navaroff was sent on various secret missions by Lloyd George. The Big Three, Wilson, Lloyd George, and Clemenceau, met in Navaroff's home in Paris. On one occasion, Navaroff went to Germany in 1917 on Lloyd George's personal instructions, disguised in the uniform of a Bulgarian army doctor. Clemenceau later said, the information which Navaroff secured in Germany for Lloyd George was the most important piece of intelligence of the whole war. End quote. Nazarov was awarded the Order of British Empire in 1918 for this mission. McCormick also notes, Nazarov had interests in refurnaces and Macomite test forges. Throughout the war no action was taken against Brie or nearby Thionville, a German area vital to the German army. Orders to bombard Brie were cancelled on orders of Nazarov. M. Barnes protested this event in a speech to the French Parliament January 24, 1919. McCormick found that Nazarov had made some interesting confessions to close associates. He boasted to receive the forms, I made wars so that I could sell arms to both sides. He offered astute political advice to Sir Robert Lord Boothby, begin on the left in politics, and then, if necessary, work over to the right. Remember it is sometimes necessary to kick off the ladder those who have helped you to climb it. In addition to his Vickers and electric boat stock, Nazarov had large holdings in other armaments manufacturers, Krupp and Skoda. The Skoda works of Czechoslovakia were controlled by the powerful Schneider family of Schneider-Kusat, headed by Eugene Schneider, whose granddaughter married the present Duke of Bedford. The Nye Committee found that Vickers interlocked with Brown Boveri of Switzerland, Fokker, Van Kademain, Mitsui, Schneider, and 10 other armaments firms around the world. Vickers set up a torpedo manufacturing firm, Societe Francaise's Destorpil Whitehead, with the former Whitehead Co., whose owner, James B. Whitehead, then became English ambassador to France. Frau Margareta von Bismarck was a director of Societe Francaise's, as was Count Edgar Hoyle of Fiume. At its peak in the 1930s, the Vickers network included Harvey Steel, Chaz, Camel & Co. Shipbuilding, John Brown & Co., Krupp and Dillinger of Germany, Turnico of Italy, Beth Adam Steel and Electric Boat in the U.S., Schneider, Chatelain Steel, Noble Dynamite Trust, and Chilworth Gunpowder Co. The trustee for the debentures of the armaments firms was Royal Exchange Assurance Co. of London, of which E. Roland Harriman of Brown Bros. Harriman was a director. As First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill obligingly changed the fuel of the entire English fleet from coal to oil, as a favour to the Samuel family, which owned Royal Dutch Shell. The most revealing works on the armaments dealers, the Nye Committee hearings, and Merchants of Death are now 50 years old. On p. 167 of Merchants, we find that, quote, the Societe Minière de Penarroya controls the most important lead mines of the world, accounting for 1/8 of the world's production. Since 1833 the French bankers, the Rothschilds, have controlled these mines, but in 1909 the Rothschild Bank entered into an alliance with the Metalgesellschaft of Frankfurt, the company in which both Mackiver and Krupp were heavily interested. This company remained under German and French control for about 2 years of the war. At the outbreak of hostilities, 150,000 tons of lead were shipped from these mines to Germany, via Switzerland. When shipments to France were resumed, the price was raised to such an extent that it more than doubled the price which the English paid for their lead. Free trade between Germany and France in important chemicals, for powder, etc. continued. The Swiss supplied both sides with electric power. All along their frontier great powerhouses sprang into being, facing Germany from Italy, producing iron, bauxite, chemicals and power. Nice products were exported to Britain throughout the war. End quote. Dr. Ellis Powell told an audience at Queen's Hall, London, March 4, 1917. Quote, at the beginning of the war many thousands of German reservists were allowed to return to Germany, although our fleet could have stopped them. German individuals, firms and companies went on trading merrily in British names, collecting their debts, and indirectly, no doubt, financing German militarism. At the very moment when Germans were destroying our property by Zeppelin bombs, we were actually paying them money instead of taking their holdings as part compensation for damage done. In January 1915 came the vicious decision by Lord Reading, Rufus Isaacs, and the appeal court, according to which Mackiver and Little William Co. was a good British company, capable of suing the King's own subjects in the King's own courts. The uninterrupted activity in this country of the Frankfurt Metal Octopus is not an accident. Let me analyze one lurid case, which has stirred public indignation and anger to its depths. I mean the impudent survival of the German banks. We have now been at war nearly 3 years, yet their doors are still open. They sent large quantities of bullion to Germany after the war started. End quote. There was a remarkable amount of goodwill and free trade continuing during World War I among the warring nations. Of course the Americans did not wish to be left out of the great outpouring of goodwill in which 40 million people were killed. It was not enough that the Americans were financing the war through their Federal Reserve System and the personal income tax, which, as Cordell Hull so aptly put it in his memoirs, had been passed in the nick of time before the outbreak of the war, nor was it enough that the Americans were feeding the Belgians, actually the Germans, through the Belgian Relief Commission, so that the war could be prolonged until the United States became a belligerent. Concerned Americans dedicated themselves to the proposition that American boys should be killed in the trenches with the British, the French, the Germans, and other nationalites. The warmongers set up 3 principal organizations to force the United States into World War I: the Council on National Defense, the Navy League, and the League to Enforce Peace. The Council on National Defense was authorized by Act of Congress August 1916, although there was no nation on earth known to be contemplating any attack on the United States. Pancho Villa had led a small group of bandits against Columbus, New Mexico, but this raid was hardly an occasion for national mobilization. It was a retaliatory strike because of the actions of New York bankers in Mexico. The warbirds held the bonds of the National Railways of Mexico. George F. Peabody and Eugene Mayer and Cleveland H. Dodge owned the copper mines of Mexico. Seligman and Co. owned electric power and light of Mexico. The Mexican Revolution was an uprising against President Porfirio Diaz, who had collaborated profitably with the warbirds and Rockefeller for years. Percy N. Ferber, president of the Oil Fields of Mexico Limited, told C.W. Barron, quote, "The Mexican Revolution was really caused by H. Clay Pierce, who owned 35% of Pierce Waters Oil Co. Standard Oil owned the other 65%. He wanted to get my property. He demanded of Diaz that he should take off the taxes on oil imports so that Standard Oil could bring in products from the U.S. Diaz refused." End quote. Ferber said that he put up the money for Francisco Madero to oust Diaz. Madero was then murdered by Victoriano Huerta, the pawn of Lord Cowdray, head of British oil interests in Mexico. In the resulting chaos, Villa and Zapata came to the fore, resulting in the Columbus raid. The Council on National Defense was chaired by Daniel Willard, Prees, B&O Railroad. Other members were, quote, list, Bernard Baruch, Julius Rosenwald, Samuel Gompers, Walter S. Gifford, President of AT&T, also Director Commission on Industrial Preparedness. Hollis Godfrey, Prees of Drexel Institute, married to Lawrence of Boston. Howard Coffin, Prees of Hudson Motor Car Co. End quote. Coffin's secretary, Grover Clarkson, ran the council. Godfrey claims in Who's Who that the council was actually created by himself, Howard Coffin, and Elihu Root. The principals of the Navy League were J.P. Morgan of U.S. Steel, Charles Schwab of Bethlehem Steel, Cal, R.M. Thompson of International Nickel, and B.F. Tracy, attorney for the Carnegie Steel Co. The principals of the League to enforce peace were Elihu Root, J.P. Morgan's lawyer, Lincoln Filing, Oscar Strauss, John Hayes Hammond, who had been sentenced to death for revolutionary activity in South Africa, Isaac Seligman, Perry Belmont, the official representative of the Rothschilds, and Jacob Schiff of Kuhn, Loeb and Co. The watchword of these millionaire makers was preparedness and fast. Second, the Navy Franklin Delano Roosevelt was already letting large Navy contracts in 1916, a year before we got into the war. Cal. House wrote to President Wilson from London on May 29, 1914, "Whenever England consents, France and Russia will close in on Germany and Austria." While preparing for war, Woodrow Wilson campaigned in 1960 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." H.C. Peterson notes in Propaganda for War, Univ, Oklahoma Press, 1939. To a large extent, the 9 million people who voted for Wilson did so because of the phrase, "He kept us out of war." Cal. House later told Viereck that Wilson had concluded an agreement with the British in 1916, long before his campaign, to involve us in the war. Roosevelt repeated the process in 1939, prior to WW2. When we went into World War I, Wilson appointed his campaign fundraiser, Bernard Baruch, head of the War Industries Board. Baruch was later investigated by the Graham Committee. He testified, "I probably had more power than perhaps any other man did in the war. Doubtless that is true," he said of his pre-war actions. Quote, "I asked for an interview with the president. I explained to him as earnestly as I could that I was deeply concerned about the necessity of the mobilization of the industries of the country. The president listened very attentively and graciously, as he always does, and the next thing I heard, some months afterward, my attention was brought to his Council of National Defense. Mr. Graham, did the president express any opinion about the advisability of adopting the scheme you proposed?" Baruch, "I think I did most of the talking." Graham, "Did you impress him with your belief that we were going to get into the war?" Baruch, "I probably did." Graham, "That was your opinion at the time?" Baruch, "Yes, I thought we were going to get into the war. I thought a war was coming long before it did." Mr. Jeffries, "Then the system you did adopt did not give the Lucas Steel and Iron Co. the amount of profit that the low-producing companies did." Baruch, "No, but we took 80% away from the others." Mr. Jeffries, "The law did that, didn't it?" Baruch, "The government did that." Graham, "What did you mean by the use of the word we?" Baruch, "The government did that, excuse me, but I meant we, the Congress." Graham, "You meant that the Congress passed a law covering that?" Baruch, "Yes, sir." Graham, "Did you have anything to do with that?" Baruch, "Not a thing." Graham, "Then I would not use the word we if I were you." End quote. Although Baruch played a crucial role in funding Wilson's campaign, in 1916, he had not ignored Wilson's almost successful opponent, Charles Evans Hughes. Carter Field points out, in his biography of Baruch, quote, "My personal view is that Baruch would have been tremendously important in the Hughes election if Hughes had been elected in the close election of 1916, both in the conduct of the war and in the making of the peace." Field continues, "Under this curious cloak of anonymity, Baruch exercised a very unusual type of political power in those early Wilson days. He was cultivated by most of the Wilsonites, who speedily found out that he could do more for them than they could do by directly appealing to Wilson. Naturally, there was no publicity for all this. End quote. Field also says, for one thing, Wilson not only loved Burrage, he admired him. Mrs. Wilson makes this specific statement in her memoirs. Wilson's relations with others were not always marked by such deep affection. David Lawrence, in his biography of Wilson, The True Story of Woodrow Wilson, notes that in June 1907, former President Grover Cleveland, a trustee of Princeton, publicly denounced Wilson's plans to alter the character of the school, making a bitter attack. Cleveland had come to live in Princeton after he left the White House, and was deeply attached to the university. He died in the summer of 1908. That fall, when Wilson, as president of the school, made his annual opening speech, he made no mention of Cleveland's death, nor did he ever schedule a memorial exercise, as was the custom when a trustee passed away. The Burrage War Industries Board, WIB, is particularly important to the present work, not only because of the dictatorial power exercised by Burrage during the war years, but because the WIB members have continued to govern the United States. From WIB and the American Commission to negotiate the peace came the Brookings Institution, which set national priorities for 50 years, NRA, National Recovery Administration, and the entire Roosevelt administration, and World War II. Working with Burrage at the WIB was, quote, List. Past Chairman, Clarence Dillon of Dillon, Reed. Robert S. Brookings, Chairman Price Fixing Committee of WIB, later founded the Brookings Institution. Felix Frankfurter, Chairman of the War Policies Labor Board. Herbert Hoover and D.F. Whitmarsh of the U.S. Food Administration. H.B. Swope, Publicity Agent for Burrage. Harrison Williams. Albert Ritchie, later Gov of Maryland. Jen Goethals. And Rear Adam, F.F. Fletcher. End quote. Goethals was replaced by Jen Pierce, who was then replaced by Jen Hugh Johnson, who became Burrage's right-hand man for many years. Field tells us that Jen Hugh Johnson stayed on Burrage's payroll for 2 months after he became head of NRA during the New Deal. Field quotes Woodrow Wilson as having Burrage at the WIB. Let the manufacturer see the club behind your door. Burrage told the Graham Committee, we fixed prices with the aid of potential federal compulsion. Left out in the Burrage-Wilson Mutual Esteem Society was William Jennings Bryan, longtime head of the Democratic Party. Bryan not only opposed our entry into World War I, he dared to criticize the family which had organized the war, the Rothschilds. Because he dared to mention the Rothschilds, Bryan was promptly denounced as anti-Semitic. He responded, quote, our opponents have sometimes tried to make it appear that we were attacking a race when we denounced the financial policy of the Rothschilds. But we are not. We are as much opposed to the financial policy of J.P. Morgan as we are to the financial policy of the Rothschilds. End quote. Because of the secret planning needed to launch a major war, control of the communications media was essential. Kent Cooper, president of the Associated Press, notes in Life, Nav. 13, 1944, Freedom of Information. Quote, before and during the First World War, the great German news agency Wolf was owned by the European banking house of Rothschild, which had its central headquarters in Berlin. A leading member of the firm was also Kaiser Wilhelm's personal banker, Max Warburg. What actually happened in Imperial Germany was that the Kaiser used Wolf to bind and excite his people to such a degree that they were eager for World War I. 20 years later under Hitler the pattern was repeated and enormously magnified by the NB, Wolf's successors. End quote. Cooper later noted in his autobiography, Paris Town, international bankers under the House of Rothschild acquired an interest in the three leading European agencies: Havas, France; Reuters, England; Wolf, Germany. On April 28, 1915, Baron Herbert de Ruyter, chief of the Reuters agency, shot himself. The cause was the crash of the Reuters Bank, which had been organized by Baron Julius de Ruyter, founder of Reuters, to handle foreign remittances without their being subjected to any accounting. He was succeeded by Sir Roderick Jones, who says in his autobiography, shortly after I succeeded Baron Herbert de Ruyter in 1915, it so happened that I received an invitation from Mr. Alfred Rothschild, then head of the British House of Rothschild, to lunch with him in historic Newport, in the city. Jones prudently refrains from telling us what was discussed at this meeting. Only one member of Congress voted against the U.S. declaration of war against Germany in World War I, Jeanette Rankin. She was also the only member of Congress to vote against our entry into World War II. Opponents of Wilson's action were often beaten and imprisoned. Eugene Debs was sentenced to a long prison term. Congressman Charles Lindbergh, S.R., ran for governor of Minnesota on a platform opposing our participation in the war. The New York Times regularly ran scathing denunciations of his campaign. On June 9, 1918, it noted, Rep. Clarence H. Miller denounced Lindbergh and the non-partisan league as seditious. According to Mr. Lindbergh, the Liberty Loan is an instrument devised by the money sharks. It seems inexcusable that any person allowed to be at large in the United States could entertain or express such a view of this. Harrison Salisbury of the New York Times states, quote, I have searched out the records, and they show that mobs trailed Charles A. Lindbergh SR during his 1918 campaign for the Republican nomination for the Minnesota governorship. He was arrested on charges of conspiracy along with the nonpartisan leaders. A rally at Madison, Min was broken up with fire hoses. He was hanged in effigy in Red Wing, dragged from the speaker's platform, threatened with lynching, and he escaped from town amid a volley of shots. End quote. Salisbury neglects to mention that a squad of federal agents from the Bureau of Investigation, led by J. Edgar Hoover on his first important action, attacked Lindbergh and his family, dragged out all the copies of Lindbergh's Your Country at War, and burned them on the lawn. When young Charles rushed forward to stomp out the fire, Hoover knocked him down. In the summer of 1917, Woodrow Wilson named Cal House to head the American War Mission to the Inter-Allied War Conference, the first such American mission to a European Council. With House were his son-in-law, Gordon O'Hincloss, and Paul Cravath, Kuhn Loeb's lawyer. O'Hincloss was director of Chase Naval Bank, Salve, Safana, and Gross and Blackwell. Meanwhile, Walter Lippmann and another group were busily working on the plans for the League of Nations. Lippmann had founded the American branch of the Fabian Society in 1905 as the Intercollegiate Socialist Society, which later became the Students for a Democratic Society after a period when it was known as the League for Industrial Democracy. James D. Shotwell and other internationalists worked with Lippmann on this organization. Although the war was going well for those who had promoted it, hostilities were ended somewhat abruptly by the unforeseen intervention of an aide to the Tsar of Russia, Maj. Gen. Count Cherep Spiridovich, who says, quote, I had a long discussion with Gen. MacDonough, chief of the War Intelligence Department in London. I submitted on Sept. 1, 1918 a report advising him peace with Bulgaria would provoke an uprising in Slavic Austria, panic in Germany, and surrender of their armies. My advice was accepted. 2 weeks later peace was signed with Bulgaria. 2 weeks later Austria was out of the war. 2 weeks later Germany surrendered. End quote. L.L. Strauss of Kuhn, Loeb co-states he was one of 4 American delegates who conferred with the Germans at Brussels in March 1990 on the final armistice. On Nav. 11, 1918, the New York Times headlined, Red's grip on Germany, Königsberg, Frankfurt on Main, Strasbourg now controlled by Spartacist Soviets. On Nav. 12, 1918, the New York Times stated, the revolution in Germany is today, to all intents and purposes, an accomplished fact. On the same day, the New York Times headlined, Splendor reigns again, jewels ablaze. The occasion was a gala evening at the Metropolitan Opera, with Caruso and Homer signing Samson and Delilah. Attending were the Autocons with the French Consul General, the George F. Baker and his sister Mrs. Goldbelow, Cornelius Vanderbilt and his daughters, the Whitneys, the J.P. Morgans, and the E.T. Stokesberrys, the Fricks. Mrs. Bernard Baruch, her husband was in Europe on important business, Mrs. Adolf Ladenburg. These celebrants were also the principal investors in American International Corporation, which was financing the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Also see, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and the American Commission to Negotiate Peace predictably included Walter Lippmann, the Dulles brothers, the Warburg brothers, Paul from the U.S., Max from Germany, L.L. Strauss, Thomas W. Lamont, as well as Cal House, Wilson and Wilson's Secretary of State, Robert Lansing, the Dulles uncle. Their genial host was Baron Edmund de Rothschild. Representing France at the peace conference was Finance Minister Klotz, who, according to Noel Baker, had for years been usefully employed by the Rothschilds to distribute bribes to the press. The Reparations Commission was established Jan. 25, 1919, with Bernard Baruch from the U.S., Klotz from France, and Lord Cunliffe, Governor of the Bank of England, representing England. Carterfield notes, nearly every afternoon Baruch had a pleasant session at Macmillan with 3 or 4 of his old cronies from the War Industries Board. Wilson returned to the United States July 8, 1919, laden with $1 million worth of jewelry, gifts from appreciative Europeans as a reward for his promise to get the U.S. into the League of Nations. Not a single member of Congress had been with him at the Paris Peace Conference. His associates were the Fabians of America, Dr. James D. Shotwell, Eugene Delano, and Jacob Schiff. Herbert Hoover immediately joined Cal House as the most vociferous advocate of our joining the League of Nations. Baruch later testified before the Graham Committee. Quote, Baruch, I was economic advisor with the Peace Commission. Graham, did you frequently advise the president while there? Baruch, whenever he asked my advice I gave it. I had something to do with the reparations clauses. I was the American commissioner in charge of what they called the economic section. I was a member of the Supreme Economic Council in charge of raw materials. Graham, did you sit in the council with the gentlemen who were negotiating the treaty? Baruch, yes, sir, some of the time. Graham, all except the meetings that were participated in by the Big Five. Baruch, and frequently those also. End quote. The Reparations Commission ordered the Germans to issue 4 issues of bonds, all to be delivered to the Reparations Commission as follows. Quote, list. 20 billion gold marks, 5 billion paper marks by May 1, 1921, for the Army of Occupation. War cost of Belgium, 4 billion gold marks due May 1, 1926. 40 billion gold marks at 1/2% interest from 1921-26 to be retired in 1951. 30-year provisional fund of general reparations. Treaty of Versailles, financial clauses 248-63. End quote. The bankers immediately began to treat these gigantic sums as sources of capital, to be monetized by loans and other negotiable instruments. Lloyd George told the NY Journal American, June 24, 1924. Quote, the international bankers dictated the non-reparations settlement. The protocol, which was signed between the Allies and associated powers and Germany, is the triumph of the international financier. Agreement would never have been reached without the brusque and brutal intervention of the international bankers. They swept statesmen, politicians and journalists to one side, and issued their orders with the imperiousness of absolute monarchs, who knew that there was no appeal from their ruthless decrees. The settlement is the joint ukase of King Dollar and King Sterling. Dawes report was theirs. They inspired and fashioned it. The Dawes report was fashioned by the money kings. The orders of German financiers to their political representatives were just as peremptory as those of Allied bankers to their political representatives. End quote. Heading the post-war world order, RIA and CFR. Although the reparations clauses achieved the desired result of forcing the Germans to fight a second world war, the primary result was the formation of a front world government, the League of Nations, while in the background the conspirators established their real governing body, the World Order, through the Royal Institute of International Affairs, RIA, and its American subsidiary, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR. In 1895, Cecil Rhodes, South African agent of the Rothschilds, established a secret society whose avowed purposes was as follows. In the end, Great Britain is to establish a power so overwhelming that wars must cease and the millennium be realized. To achieve this goal, he left $150 million to the Rhodes Trust. The Rothschild already had a group with similar aims, the Round Table, set up by Lord Alfred Milner, into which J.P. Morgan had been recruited in 1899. The Council on Foreign Relations Handbook of 1936 states, quote, on May 30, 1919, several leading members of the delegations to the Paris Peace Conference met at the Hotel Majestic in Paris to discuss setting up an international group which would advise their respective governments on international affairs. The U.S. was represented by Gen. Tasker H. Bliss, Chief of Staff, U.S. Army, Col. Edward M. House, Whitley H. Shepardson, Dr. James D. Shotwell, and Prof. Archibald Coolidge. Great Britain was unofficially represented by Lord Robert Cecil, Lionel Curtis, Lord Eustace Percy, and Harold Temperley. It was decided at this meeting to call the proposed organization the Institute of International Affairs. At a meeting on June 5, 1919, the planners decided it would be best to have separate organizations cooperating with each other. Consequently, they organized the Council on Foreign Relations, with headquarters in New York, and a sister organization, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, in London, also known as the Chatham House Study Group, to advise the British government. A subsidiary organization, the Institute of Pacific Relations, was set up to deal exclusively with Far Eastern affairs. Other organizations were set up in Paris and Hamburg, the Hamburg branch being called the Institut für Auswärtige and the Paris branch being known as Centre d'études de politique étrangère, at 13 Rue de Four, Paris VI. End quote. The Hamburg branch was established, of course, because of the Warburg family bank there. Having dominated the Paris Peace Conference, Baron Edmund de Rothschild saw the establishment of the world order through these groups as the crowning achievement of his life. The founders of the RIA were, one and all, Rothschild men. Honorary chairman of the CFR was Elihu Root, lawyer for Morgan and Coon, Loeb Co., Alexander Hemphill, a Morgan banker, and Otto Kahn of Coon, Loeb Co. The founders of the RIA were Rothschild's principal South African agents. Quote, list. Sir Otto Bate, trustee of Rhodes Estate and director of British South Africa Co. Percy L. Portmoltino, son of the first Premier of Cape Colony. Sir Abe Bailey, owner of the Transvaal Mines, who worked closely with Sir Alfred Milner in starting the Boer War. John W. Wheeler Bennett, who became Gen. Eisenhower's political advisor at Chief London 1944-45. Sir Julian Kahn. Lionel Curtis, Colonial Secretary of the Transvaal, who gave his address as the Round Table, 175 Piccadilly RD, London. He was later appointed Bate Lecturer on the Colonial History of South Africa. End quote. Other founders of RIA included 4 members of the Astor family, Viscount Astor, Hahn, FDL, David Astor, ML, Astor, and John Jacob Astor V, the latter being chairman of the Times and director of Ambrose Bank. The first president of RIA was L.T. Cowell, R.W. Leonard, president of the Canagas Mines. The Lord Patron was Her Majesty the Queen. All prime ministers and viceroys of the colonies since 1923 have been honorary presidents of RIA. Stephen King Hall, in his definitive work, Chatham House, says, the Prince of Wales graciously accepted the office of visitor. This appointment secured that the Institute could never be converted to party or propaganda purposes. Right, ed. The 1934 list of members of RIA included Sir Austin Chamberlain, Prime Minister, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Lord Privy Seal, and Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Harold Macmillan, who married the daughter of the Duke of Devonshire and later became Prime Minister, and Lord Eustace Percy, Duke of Northumberland. The 1942 membership list includes, quote, list. Sir Roderick Jones, Head of Reuters. G.M. Catherine Hardy. Sir Andrew McFadden, Chairman North British Orinoco and United Rubber Estates. He served with the British Treasury 1910-1917, represented the Treasury at the Paris Peace Conference 1919-20, was Gen. Secretary of the Reparations Commission, 1922-25, Commissioner of Controlled Revenues Berlin 1924-30, later with S.G. Warburg Co. Carl Vickers. Lord Brand, Managing Director Laird Browne, who married Lady Astor's sister, Phyllis Langhorne, was Deputy Chairman British Mission in Washington 1917-18, Financial Advisor to Lord Robert Cecil, CHMN Supreme Economic Council at the Paris Peace Conference. George Gibson, Dyer, Bank of England. John Hambro of Hambro's Bank. Lord Derby Edward Villiers, Lord of Treasury, Secretary of State for War, 1916-1918, who had a 69,000-acre estate in Lancashire. Lord Cromer Baring. End quote. During its early years, RIA was principally funded by the Rothschilds through donations funneled through Sir Abe Bailey and Sir Alfred Bate, with about $100,000 per year. Since then, it has been funded with many millions of dollars by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Corporation. In 1936, the RIA $400,000 budget was also funded by the following corporate subscribers: N.M. Rothschild and Sons, British South Africa Co., Bank of England, Reuters News Agency, Prudential Assurance Co., Sun Insurance Office Limited, and Vickers Armstrong Limited, all of which were known as Rothschild Enterprises. Other subscribers were J. Henry Schroeder Co., Lazard Frears, Morgan Grenfell, Erlangers Limited, and E.D. Sassoon Co. A number of popular books now in circulation claim that the Council on Foreign Relations is the secret government of the United States. Nothing could be more incorrect. The members of the Council on Foreign Relations have never originated a single item of policy for the U.S. government. They merely transmit orders to our government officials from the RIA and the House of Rothschild in London. It is true that the CFR comprises a ruling elite in the United States, but they are mere colonial governors absolutely responsible to their overseers in the world order. However, every prominent American mentioned in the present book is a member of the CFR, and therefore it is not necessary to note it each time a name is mentioned. Not only do they transmit orders to the White House, the Cabinet, the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and other government institutions, but they also maintain absolute control of the foundations, whose duty it is to formulate policy or organize it in acceptable form to be transmitted to the government. Shoup's Imperial Brain Trust, 1969, notes that the CFR includes 22 trustees of Brookings Institution, 29 at Rand, 40 at Hudson, 33 at Middle East Institute, 40 of 19 trustees of the Rockefeller Foundation, 10 of 17 at Carnegie, 7 of 16 at Ford Foundation, 6 of 11 at Rockefeller Brothers Fund. This proves that the CFR runs these major foundations. In the academic world, CFR members number 58 on the faculty at Princeton, 69 at the University of Chicago, and 30 at Harvard. Of the banks, which are the principal owners of Federal Reserve Bank stock, directors of Chase include 7 CFR members, 8 at JP Morgan, 7 at First National City, now Citibank, 6 at Chemical Bank, and 6 at Brown Bros. Harriman. The 1968 list of CFR members included John J. McCloy, Chairman of the Board, Frank Altschul, Secretary and Vice President, David Rockefeller Vice President, and Directors Robert V. Russa, Douglas Dillon, and Alan Dulles. McCloy also served as Chairman of the Ford Foundation 1953-65, Director of the Rockefeller Foundation, and personal lawyer to the Rockefeller family interests. His career is typical of a leading official of the world order. While a student at Harvard, he became a protege of Felix Frankfurter. He joined the firm of Cravath, Swaine and Moore, lawyers for Kuhn, Loeb Co., where he remained from 1925-40. In 1940, Frankfurter recommended him to Henry Stimson and Mast, Second War, where he remained from 1941-45. He wrote and issued the infamous War Department directive that military officers must disregard political views of servicemen unless there is a specific finding that the individual involved has a loyalty to the Communist Party which overrides his loyalty to the U.S. Senator McCarthy termed this directive treasonable. McCloy succeeded Eugene Mayer as president of the World Bank from 1947-49, was appointed High Commissioner of Germany where he served from 1949-52, was chairman of the board Chase National Bank from 1953-61, and Rockefeller's attorney since then. He is a director of Union Pacific, Westinghouse, at Dreyfus, Squibb, and Mercedes-Benz. He married Ellen Zinsser, who is not otherwise identified in McCloy's 1947 current biography. In the 1961 issue, she is identified as the niece of Hans Zinsser, a bacteriologist. This is odd, because she is also the daughter of John Zinsser, partner of J.P. Morgan Co., and chairman of the board of Sharp and Dome Chemicals. It is an interesting footnote to history that the son-in-law of a J.P. Morgan partner should be appointed U.S. High Commissioner of a vanquished Germany. The New York Times noted on Aug. 6, 1965, J.J. McCloy proposes foundation pattern for European giving. He stated at Salzburg, I wish that there could be erected in Europe a complex of foundations whose representatives could exchange thoughts with those of American foundations and thus form a sort of informal approach to some of the great problems of the day. Informal is the code word of the world order. It means issuing from world headquarters. McCloy did not state the obvious, that 5 men control all of the major U.S. foundations, and that he wished they could have the same system in Europe. Maria has worked closely with the London School of Economics, which was set up as a training school for the world order bureaucrats. The school was established in 1920 with financial aid from the Rothschilds and Sir Julius Werner. Sir Ernest Cassel later gave the school £472,000. Prof. J.H. Morgan wrote in Quarterly Review, Jan. 1939. Quote, when I once asked Lord Kelvin why he persuaded his friend Sir Ernest Cassel, grandfather of Lady Mountbatten, to settle by his will large sums on the London School of Economics, he replied, our object is to make this institution a place to raise and train the bureaucracy of the future socialist state. End quote. Sir William Beveridge, author of Great Britain's Ruinous Cradle to the Brave Political Programme, was director of the London School of Economics from 1920-1937. Heading the opium trade and other ventures. The British Empire has prospered on piracy, slavery and the drug traffic. Drake's Pirates became the Merchants Adventurers Co. Sebastian Cabot, which later became the Chartered Co. of East India. It was reorganized in 1700. It originally paid the Hong of Canton silver for tea, but discovered they would accept opium instead. This fortuitous arrangement encountered resistance from some Chinese leaders, causing England to prosecute 10 opium wars against China, from the Opium War of 1840-43 to the Manchurian Conquest of 1931. In 1715, the British East India Co. opened its first Far East office in Canton. Crown policy deliberately fostered opium addiction among the natives to facilitate British political control. The British Empire was then threatened with bankruptcy if it lost the American colonies. In order to defeat the rebels, the profits of the opium trade with China were sent to the Elector of Hesse via Mayor Amschel Rothschild to hire 16,800 Hessian troops. Thus the drug traffic and the Rothschilds played a pivotal role in American history, although it has been ignored or deleted from the history books. David Ricardo, father of the quantity theory of money and the rent, or loot theory, was on the court of proprietors of the East India Co. He had John Stuart Mill appointed as chief examiner. The colonial minister of England during the Opium Wars was Edward Bulwer Lytton, who wrote the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, bringing England 21 million in silver and control over the free port of Hong Kong. Britain then allied with the Han Society, the Triads and Assassins, to rule the Chinese to the present time. Bulwer Lytton's son was Viceroy of India during the 1880s at the height of the opium trade, and sponsored Rudyard Kipling's writings about the British Raj in India. The profiteers from the drug trade included William, Earl of Shelburne, who organized Britain's first intelligence service, whose agents were drawn from Britain's leading families. Its chairman was George Baring, and it employed Adam Smith, Jeremy Bentham, and Thomas Malthus. The Geneva headquarters was run by the Mallet-Prevost family, whose descendants include Alan Dulles of the CIA. Basil Lubbock's work, The Opium Clippers, 1933, lists the principal owners of British vessels engaged in the opium trade, with color illustrations of their flags. Most of them were ex-slavers. No, one was Han, East India Co., known to the Chinese as Han John Co. 2. Jardine Matheson, 3. Dent & Co., 4. Pybus Rose, 5. Russell & Co., 6. Common Rose, 7. Duchess of Atholl, 8. Earl of Balcarres, 9. George Roman 4, 10. Prince Regent, 11. Marquis of Camden, 12. Lady Melville. On Feb. 1, 1927, the New York Times noted the passing of Sir Robert Jardine, the son and heir of the late Sir Robert Jardine, and succeeded his father as the head of Jardine Matheson & Co. Hong Kong, which for a long time held almost a monopoly in the importation of Indian opium into China. Sir Robert had inherited $20 million and 20,000 acres in Scotland. Dr. William Jardine had settled in Canton in 1819. Note that the Jardine Matheson corporate logo is a stylized opium poppy flower. Follow link to their website. Ed. The present Duke of Atholl owns 202,000 acres at Blair Castle, and is the only person in England authorized by the Crown to maintain a private army. Lady Melville's ancestor, George, the first Earl, welcomed William of Orange to the throne in 1688, and was appointed Lord Privy Seal. In Paris, Bank Rothschild directors include, quote, list. Elijah Rothschild, director of Newport Securities, Bank Umida Israel, and Five Arrows Fund N.V., Curacao. Alain de Rothschild, Five Arrows Fund Curacao, Bank Lambert de Bruxelles. Guy de Rothschild, Rio Tinto Zinc, Newport Securities, N.Y. Sir James Goldsmith. Hubert Fora, Ambassador to Colombia, Pries, Schneider Madrid, and 10 of his companies. Bernard de Villemagin, Pries, Imetal, Director Copperwell. End quote. Sir James Goldsmith is also chairman of General Occidental, which owns Grand Union and Colonial Food Stores in the U.S., Cavenham USA, and Bank Occidental. Its directors include David de Rothschild, son of Guy, who is also director of Compagnie du Nord and Société de Nickel. Through the Belgian branch of the Rothschild family, we can trace the influence of the Rothschilds in Africa during the past century. Baron Leon Lambert financed King Leopold's Belgian Empire. The Congo Syndicate included Baron Empain, L. Compagnie d'Orient, F. Philipson and Co., and Banque Rimeur. This syndicate was allied with Banque de Paris, the Anglo-Italian group, and the Peking Syndicate. The Congo Empire came into being in 1885 after Leopold had financed Stanley's explorations. It included an area the size of Poland, and produced fabulous returns from Congo rubber, ivory and slaves. Later the Union Miniere acquired vast copper mines, the Compagnie de Katanga. One of their most ruthless agents was Emile Franqui, who later became Herbert Hoover's partner in China and in the Belgian Relief Commission. His name survives at Congo Fort Franqui. The Congo interests are now controlled by the Lamberts through Société Générale de Banque, which merged the Société Générale de Belgique, the oldest bank in Brussels, founded in 1822, and Banque Denver, founded 1827. Its secretary is Baron Falconville, a director of the Rockefeller Foundation. Société Générale acquired Union Miniere in Dec. 1981. In 1972 it had acquired Compagnie Rimeur, formerly Banque Rimeur, and in Dec. 1964, had acquired 25% of Sofana, Société Financière de Transport and Enterprises Industrielles, the largest holding company in Europe. These firms are controlled by the Rothschild Bank, Banque Bruxelles Lambert, founded in 1840 by Baron Lambert. The present Baron is director of Société Générale de Banque, and president of Compagnie Générale d'Enterprises Electric, which owns 50 power companies. Banque Lambert de Bruxelles is also the Lambert part of the Wall Street firm of Drexel Burnham Lambert, owning 19% of it. Gerard Eskenazi is director of Compagnie Générale. He is also managing director of Electrorail SA, a holding company for Schneider SA, European Trading and African Corp, and Canadian Investment Trust. The president of Electrorail is Baron Empain. Eskenazi is also director of Compagnie International des Wagons Litz, Thomas Cook Travel Agency. Baron Edouard Empain and his son Baron Francois Empain are also directors of Compagnie Générale. Another Belgian holding company, Wilhelmus Frères Leon, established 1867, now owns Food Giant and Food Town stores in the U.S., renamed Food Lion. Through Banque Bruxelles and its interlocking companies, the Rothschilds effectively control Belgium. They also interlock with the Fernand Taxis interests in Germany. Prince Johann Herb Prince Fernand Taxis is said to be the richest man in Europe, controlling Bayerische Vereinsbank, fourth largest bank in Germany, which has 4 subsidiaries in Frankfurt, including Bank Hausgebruder Bethmann. Bethmann, however, of this family had been chancellor under Kaiser Wilhelm and had set off World War I. He was a cousin of the Rothschilds. Bayerische Vereinsbank also owns controlling interest in Banque de Paris et de Pays, and Banque de l'Europe in Paris. Fernand Taxis is a direct descendant of William of Orange, who chartered the Bank of England. His mother, the Princess of Braganza of the former ruling House of Portugal, has 3 direct family connections with the present House of Windsor. Prince Fernand Taxis also has 4 connections with the House of Windsor. The Fernand Taxis family has enjoyed 800 years of prominence in Europe. Originally Paso and Bergamo, they later emigrated to Brussels. They supervised the postal service and intelligence of the most serene Republic of Venice, and later fulfilled the same post in the Habsburg Empire. The present prince has huge estates in Brazil. He is the financial advisor of the Rolling Stones, and his palace of St. Emerans is larger than Buckingham Palace. It costs 2.5 million DM a year to maintain. The Regensburg branch of the family was allied with the Fuggers and the Wessers. They now finance the Pan-European Union, which is headed by the Habsburg heir, Archduke Otto, and the Montpellerin Society, a subsidiary of Pan-Europe. The House of Hesse, which played such a crucial role in the founding of the Rothschild fortune, and in the founding of America, seldom appears in the news. On Nov. 17, 1937, 6 members of the family were killed in the crash of a Sable airliner at the fog-shrouded Ostend Airport. The head of the family, Grand Duke Ernst Ludwig, who had tried to end World War I by a desperate mission into Russia to confer with the Tsar, had died on Oct. 9, causing the postponing of Prince Ludwig's marriage to Margaret Campbell Geddes in London for 7 weeks. Grand Duke George, the new head of the family, his wife Princess Cecilia of Greece and Denmark, 2 sons, and the Dowager Duchess, as well as the newly born son of Princess Cecilia, were all killed. The child's unexpected arrival apparently caused the tragedy, as the pilot tried to land at Ostend, an unscheduled stop. Prince Ludwig, social attaché at the German embassy in London, went ahead with the wedding on the following day. His best man was his cousin Prince Louis Mountbatten. 2 princes of Hesse had married 2 daughters of Queen Victoria. Beatrice had married Prince Henry of Battenberg, grandfather of the present husband of Queen Elizabeth. Prince Ludwig's father-in-law, Sir Auckland Campbell Geddes, also had a Rothschild connection. He was chairman of Rio Tinto. He served as Minister of National Service, 1917-19, British Ambassador to the U.S., 1920-24. His brother, Sir Eric Geddes, was a member of the Imperial War Cabinet and First Lord of the Admiralty 1917-18, Minister of National Transport 1919-21, and later Chairman Imperial Airways and Dunlop Rubber. His son, Sir Anthony Geddes, married into the Massey family, became Director of the Bank of England, Deputy Chairman Midland Bank, Director Shell Transport and Trading, and is now CHM and Dunlop Holdings. Sir Auckland's son, the 2D Baron, was with Shell Oil 1931-46, British Merchant Shipping Mission in Washington, 1942-44, Minister of War Transport, 1944-45, and is now Director of Peninsular and Orient Steamship Lines. On June 7, 1946, the New York Times headlined a front-page story from Frankfurt on Main. The Army was seeking $1,500,000 in stolen jewels, later revised to $3 million value. The jewels, belonging to the House of Hesse, had been hidden in the cellar of their castle in 1944. They belonged to Princess Margaretha, sister of Kaiser Wilhelm. A party of U.S. Army officers had held a party at the Hesse castle to celebrate the anniversary of D-Day. During the party, they discovered 1,600 bottles of wine buried in the cellar. Beneath the wine they found the jewels. 10 of the celebrants drank the wine and divided up the jewels. Madge, Jen, J.M. Bevins, who was reprimanded, later returned his part of the loot. Whack. Captain Kathleen Durant and her husband, Carl J. Durant, were tried after 2 quarts of diamonds were dug up in the backyard of their Falls Church home. Madge. David Watson also was sentenced. He had been previously awarded the Bronze Medal personally by Gen. Eisenhower for his supply work, and also received the Russian Medal for Battle Merit from Marshal Zhukov. The House of Hesse is also known for the Curse of Hesse, their introduction of the family disease of hemophilia into many of the ruling houses of Europe, particularly the Spanish royal family and the Romanov family in Russia. Old Mayor Amschel's heritage has survived intact, according to the Washington Post. Deck 20, 1984, which notes that Frankfurt am Main is the financial capital of Germany, headquarters of the 5 dominant German banks, with 175 foreign banks established there. It also is headquarters for the central bank, and the country's largest stock exchange. Like Manhattan, it is also a center of vice and corruption, with sex shops, drugs, and frequent riots because of the presence of 11,000 American occupation troops. Heading First City and Rothschilds, Inc. Penetration of the United States is shown by a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Deck 21, 1984, a solicitation to purchase all the outstanding shares of Scoville, Inc. by First City Properties, Inc. with the deal managed by Rothschild, Inc. 1 Rockefeller Plaza, New York. First City is the Rothschild code for banks originating under their influence from the City of London Financial District. First City Properties, Beverly Hills, Calif, is headed by Samuel Ellsberg, who also heads First City Financial Corp. Vancouver, First City Trust, Edmonton, and First City Development Limited. He is a director of Betsy Canal Co. The Ellsbergs started in Canada with a used furniture store, Rag and Bone Men, and are now influential wheeler dealers on the American stock market. Rothschild Inc., established at the Rockefeller address, is successor to Bank Rothschild of Paris. Its co-chairmen are Guy Rothschild and Evelyn de Rothschild. Directors are Lord Jacob Rothschild, head of N.M. Rothschild and Sons, London, David de Rothschild, Nathaniel de Rothschild, Eric de Rothschild, Thomas L. Piper Roman III, SRVP Dylan Reed, and manager of the Rothschilds Newport Securities. Its managing director is Wilbur L. Ross Jr., who is also director of Peabody International, and N.M. Rothschilds and Sons International. Other directors of Rothschild International include John Loudon, former chairman of Shell Oil, director of Ford Motor Co., the Ford Foundation, Orion Bank, and chairman of Atlantic Institute. He is a Grand Officer of the Order of Orange Nassau, a group formed to commemorate the chartering of the Bank of England by William of Orange in 1694. Another director of Rothschild Inc. is G. Peter Fleck, born in Amsterdam, chairman Newport Securities, formerly with Erlangers, and the Banque de Pays de l'Europe Central of Paris, cited by Hyana Bank during Nazi occupation of France. Fleck is also officer of the Order of Orange Nassau. Banque de Pays de l'Europe of Paris. Paribas was recently bought by Merrill Lynch. Paribas bought 50% of Dylan Reed Limited in a consortium with Bruxelles Lambert, the Belgian Rothschilds, the Power Group, and the Laurentian Group of Canada, the Tata Group of India, Elder IXL Holding Company of Australia, Swiss Bank Cantrade, and 2 British groups, Investors in Industry, a Bank of England group with 9 English and Scottish banks, and the British Postal Pension Fund. Power Corp of Canada directors included G.S. Canali, of Belgian Rothschild firms, and William Simon, former Secretary of the Treasury of the U.S. The Canadian connection, the Ellsbergs and Bronfmans, demonstrates the growing power of the Rothschilds in billion-dollar mergers and takeovers of U.S. industry, including DuPont. These mergers recall the same kind of activity taking place in 1929, just before the stock market debacle, and represent the battening down of the hatches before the storm. End text.